On December 26, 1900, a relief keeper climbed 160 steps to a lighthouse, opened the door, and found a meal on the table for 3 men who would never come back to eat it. The Flannan Isles light had gone dark 11 days earlier. 3 keepers vanished from one of the most isolated outposts in the North Atlantic, and over a century later, no one can prove why. On the night of December 15, 1900, the steamer Arctur was passing through the challenging waters of the Outer Hebrides when its crew observed that the Flannan Isles light was completely dark. In an era before radio communication, this silence from the tower could not be instantly investigated. It was only when the Arctur docked in Leith 3 days later, on December 18th, that the captain officially reported the dark outpost to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The administrative machinery of the board moved with its customary deliberation, placing the matter on the agenda to organize a relief vessel. Yet on Isle More, silence was a difficult thing to interpret from afar. In these remote outposts, a dark lamp might mean a broken clockwork mechanism, a shortage of oil, or a minor mishap, making it easy to overlook until it was too late. If the light went out on that December night, what actually happened on the rock before the relief crew arrived? On December 26, 1900, 11 days after the light went dark, the Northern Lighthouse Board tender, Hesperus, at last reached Isle More. Severe winter storms had held the vessel back at her port in Breasclete-on-Lewis, stretching what should have been a routine holiday relief voyage into days of anxious waiting. As the tender drew near, Captain Jim Harvey sounded the steam siren and launched a warning flare. The flagpole on the cliff stood bare, and no one came down to the landing. Joseph Moore, the assistant keeper scheduled to rotate onto duty, boarded a small boat and was rowed to the east landing. He made the steep climb up the 160 stone steps alone, carrying the weight of the island's silence. At the top, the entrance gate and the outer door to the quarters were closed, offering no immediate sign of distress. Stepping inside, Moore found himself in a cold, silent kitchen. The fireplace was empty, indicating the hearth had been dead for days. On the table sat a meal laid out for 3, bread, butter, and meat, completely untouched. Nearby, a kitchen chair lay on its side on the floor, and the wall clock had stopped ticking. The only sign of life was a caged canary, still alive in the quiet. When Moore searched the wardrobe, the physical inventory of the station revealed a specific clue. 2 sets of heavy waterproof oilskin suits were missing. The third set, belonging to occasional keeper Donald MacArthur, still hung on its hook. In the isolated environment of a remote lighthouse, these ordinary objects take on an unsettling weight. They suggest a sudden interrupted routine rather than a gradual departure. The station was in perfect working order, clean and secure, yet entirely vacant. While the quarters confirmed that the keepers had vanished, this domestic scene on its own offered no explanation. It was a picture of life suspended in mid-action, leaving those who found it with far more questions than answers. On December 29, 1900, 3 days after the relief ship arrived, Robert Muirhead stepped ashore on Isle More. As the superintendent of the Northern Lighthouse Board, Muirhead knew the vanished keepers personally, having visited them just weeks earlier on December 7. While the quiet preservation of the living quarters offered few answers, Muirhead turned his attention away from the kitchen to the island's rugged shoreline, specifically the exposed west landing. Here, where Isle More meets the full force of the Atlantic swell, he began a forensic examination of the physical evidence. The damage was structural and severe. Iron safety railings, built to withstand standard winter gales, were bent and twisted out of shape. A section of the supply railway, anchored firmly into concrete footings, had been ripped clean from its moorings. Most striking of all, a massive stone boulder, weighing several tons, had been displaced from its resting ledge, more than 100 feet above sea level, while a heavy wooden supply box, lay completely shattered, its contents scattered across the rocks. For Muirhead, this localized wreckage became the foundation of the official inquiry. He interpreted these battered installations as the unmistakable signature of a violent sea event rather than signs of human conflict. In his report, he detailed how a massive body of water must have rushed up the narrow rocky gully, gaining speed and height as it pressed against the sheer basalt cliffs. To the Northern Lighthouse Board, it provided a tidy official explanation. An extraordinarily large wave must have scaled the cliffs, washing the men into the sea. Yet, this explanation rested entirely on the silent testimony of twisted steel and broken stone. Superintendent Robert Muirhead formalized this theory in his official report to the Northern Lighthouse Board on January 8, 1901. According to his reconstruction, the sequence of events began on the afternoon of December 15th. He proposed that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall made their way down to the west landing to secure a box of mooring rope stored in a crevice over 100 feet above the sea. While they worked against the rising swell, a sudden, massive wave overtopped the platform, catching both men and dragging them into the North Atlantic. In this scenario, Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper left behind in the tower, heard or saw the disaster from above. Muirhead suggested that MacArthur rushed out to aid his colleagues, running down the stone steps in such haste that he left his heavy oilskins hanging on the peg. He too was swept away by the surging waters. It is a tidy, linear narrative that offers the comfort of closure to an anxious public and a grieving family. Yet, this reconstruction remains an elegant interpretation rather than an established fact. The entire theory rests on a foundation of empty space. No bodies were ever recovered from the waters around Isle More, and no eyewitnesses survived to confirm the order of events. Without physical remains or direct testimony, Muirhead's report represents the exact limit of what the official record can claim. It is a plausible working hypothesis, preserved in archival ink, but one that ultimately leaves the final moments of the three keepers lost to the ocean. Muirhead's wave sweep theory remains the most reasonable explanation we have, yet it suffers from a fundamental vulnerability. Nobody saw it happen. In the absence of an eyewitness, the void has filled with less disciplined ideas. One persistent rumor points to a physical struggle, centering on Donald MacArthur's alleged volatile temper. A theory that is highly dramatic, but entirely unsupported by his clean disciplinary record. Similarly, while the crushing isolation of Isle More was a recognized professional hazard, it is quite a leap to treat general occupational stress as proof of sudden, shared madness. Remoteness explains the vulnerability of the outpost, but it is not evidence of a specific cause. The lack of direct testimony means every theory remains incomplete. We are left with a quiet kitchen, some battered iron railings, and a mystery that the Atlantic refuses to surrender. To trace more of history's unresolved departures, subscribe. On September 28, 1971, the Northern Lighthouse Board automated the Flannan Isles station, ending the era of resident keepers. The tower now operates unattended, monitored from Edinburgh. Over the decades, the story of the vanished men expanded far beyond the official archives, finding a permanent place in maritime lore through poems, films, and repeated retellings. Today, the lighthouse itself remains the only witness to the events of December 1900. The case endures in public memory because it has never surrendered a final answer, leaving the fates of the three keepers forever suspended in the quiet of the North Atlantic. Today, Isle More's light flashes automatically, leaving the island to its silence. The North Atlantic keeps its secrets, reminding us of the fragile line between duty and the deep. If you find solace in these quiet corners of maritime history, subscribe to join our next voyage.